Hello, and welcome to Leadership Development Skills. I'm your Professor John Harvey, and this week you are working on Chapter 5 in the schedule. Um, that's up and running for you guys this week. Also, talking schedule-wise, next week is kind of a big one. So that's when your leadership interviews are due. So definitely worth talking about here. Here's the requirements. I really want you to focus in on networking. I don't want you to just interview your brother or your husband or something like that. I want you to go and reach out to somebody that you would look up to. You know, someone who's really doing something that you care about, involved in something that you would like to be involved in. And I want you to use this opportunity to do the interview to get in front of them, okay? So networking is so critical, and I think I've talked with you guys about that already, but for this leadership one, it is wide open. You should be applying the material that we've covered. So we've covered chapters 1 through 5. So talking about motivation, talking about organization, talking about how you manage stress, all these kind of things. This is all that kind of interview stuff that I would expect to see in the paper. In terms of format and all that, I mean it's 12-point font, double spaced. I would expect to see at least 3 pages or so. But I like to leave it up to you to have that creativity. Come up with your questions. Do the research on the person before you get there. Ask them relevant questions. Tie in the material from the textbook. And I'm telling you, you can make a really good impression to somebody who will want to hire you. Okay? So this is a great way to get in front of them. It's a great way to make that connection. So you're doing your work. Like I said, that's what's coming up next week. So right now, this week, you should be calling and trying to schedule and say, hey, can we meet this week? Oh, we can't? Okay, what about next week? Oh, okay, let's do that. I do want it in person. And like I said, I don't want it to be something really simple for you in terms of like, well, I already work for this guy, so I'll interview my boss. Okay, it's not the point. Like I said, you want to try and reach, okay? You want to broaden your network and get to these people that can really influence and help your career. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to bring up is the discussion board. So this week's discussion board is kind of a strange one. I mean, what we've done in the past years, we've done a whole bunch of videos, and this one I just kind of give you this, this piece out of the textbook. So it's worth kind of clarifying for you guys. Being able to communicate is very important. There's all these different ways to communicate, and everyone thinks they're a good communicator, but unless they actually practice it and work on it, they don't get better at that. And they can think that they're great, but they're really not. All that is kind of standard stuff. What I tell you is being able to tell a story, super helpful in almost everything you do. So if you have public speaking, if you have need to present something to the family, if you need to present something to coworkers, all of these scenarios all can benefit from you working on being able to tell a good story. Okay, so I can tell you, here's a simple story for you. I'm involved in Boy Scouts, and the more I've been involved in Boy Scouts, the more I really like Boy Scouts, and the more I think it's very beneficial for people that want to increase their skills, understand the outdoors. It's just a great leadership and personal development program. So I've been involved in Cub Scouts all the way through Boy Scouts. All that's fairly interesting. But here's the story. So my wife and I got married, and we went up to a cabin in the middle of Idaho, and it's a cabin that her grandfather built. And been up there a bunch of times with her when we were dating and all that kind of stuff. Now, you know, we said, hey, let's go up there for our honeymoon. And we're like, that's awesome. Okay, let's do that. And we can spend a whole bunch of time up there and just be us. And how wonderful will that be? Wonderful. Okay, great. Well, we get there the first night and I go to try and start a fire. Didn't know how to start a fire. Never had to start a fire. So I'm sitting there with this brick of wood and a match, and I'm like, light it, light the match, set it on the brick of wood, it's not working. I get a bunch of paper, crumple up the paper, I light the paper, set the brick on there. It doesn't do anything. It just, paper burns up and goes out. I spent probably a half an hour trying to start a fire, couldn't do it. I didn't have the skills. No idea how to do it. You know, I've been around a campfire and I, you know, threw a log in there or whatever, but in terms of actually starting one, didn't have that skill. Fast forward 7 years and we started having kids, and I said to myself, you know what? I learned how to start a fire. I learned knife safety. I learned all this outdoor cooking. I've gotten all these skills. I want to make sure that my boys learn this stuff early so they know how to do this. Okay? So first thing I do when they get up to the right ages, I'm like, we're joining Cub Scouts. And in Cub Scouts, they started learning all sorts of things. You know, they learned all these outdoor skills, and you go on hikes and you go on outings and you learn about how to, you know, not get blisters on your feet when you go hiking. Okay, great. Now you learn how to do a little trail snacks. And through the scouting program, my boys have learned how to start fires, knife safety, how to be a good citizen, you know, how to reach out and make contact with people. I mean, the list goes on and on. And all of these skills were developed in Boy Scouts, and they've just got this great program for it. And I look back at my experience and I'm like, man, I didn't have those skills. I didn't know where to even get those, you know? When you're already like in high school and you go, I've never cooked on a campfire stove. How do I do that? Boy Scouts shows you that. So, okay, that's my story, right? It's engaging. It grabs you. That kind of thing is what you need to learn so that whatever the topic is that you're working on, you figure out how to use a story. And that's what I'm trying to get you to work on in this discussion board. So pick a story, try and put the elements together to make that story compelling. And it can be a story you've heard, it can be a story you've told, whatever the case is. What I want you to do in the discussion board is just get a story, either tweak it, work on it, analyze it, something along those lines, okay? So not a high pressure thing, just kind of work on that storytelling, because I can tell you, I've sat around with CEOs at dinners. You got to have a story. You got to have something you can say. I've been in events where, you know, they call on you and say, hey, can you come up and, you know, talk a little bit? You got to be ready for that stuff. So being able to tell a story, super important, guys. It is very critical for leadership, and that's what this class is all about. So hopefully that helps on the discussion board. I can't wait to read your stories. Can't wait to hear about the stuff. All right, guys, with that, have a great week.